Welcome back to Magnetic. Today's guest sits at the intersection of talent, brand, and big ideas. Sherif Hamed is the head of talent ventures at WME and Endeavor, where he helps some of the world's most influential artists and creators build businesses that go far behind the spotlight. Whether it's launching a brand, investing in a category, or shaping a long-term vision, Sherif's work is all about turning cultural capital into real-world impact. He's a strategic operator with a creative lens, someone who understands both the business of influence and the influence of great business. In this episode, we get into how talent-led brands are evolving, what makes a venture truly authentic to the person behind it, and why focus, timing, and narrative are everything when you're building at the highest level. Sherif Hamed, welcome to Magnetic. It's great to sit down with you again. Let's get into it. Well, it's so funny, man. When I started this, and we were talking about like Ashwin being on and all that, and
Yeah.
I was actually excited because it's really cool to have come from a university like NYU
Mhm.
where there is just such diversity in the types of people that it's bred
Mm.
that you don't get typically anywhere else. Like we were
Yeah.
just talking before about like your background, just from obviously, and that's what I want to go into in a second, but coming from such a unique lens of like music,
Mm.
Fortune family, and culture
Yeah.
and all of those little pieces that you can only connect the dots looking backwards,
Mm.
which is a real mantra that I've believed it's such a special thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
Like reflect on connecting dots that actually make no sense looking forward.
Totally.
And you've been one of the people that I've had the pleasure of knowing for over a long period of time. Over what now? Like it's been like 14, 15 years.
It's a long time.
15 years is a long time.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Even though we haven't stayed as close as we probably
Mhm.
could have, I think I've just seen your progression from someone who has been very relatable to my story too, coming from a culture of music, entertainment,
Mm.
kind of going into this world of corporate life,
Yeah.
and then transitioning back again into a world that now we can connect on, which we
Mhm.
will today,
Yeah.
around the world of brands and the intersection of art, culture, trends, all this shit that's gonna be fun to talk about. I'd love for you to dive into your personal narrative because I think it's such a special piece of who you are and probably, I'm guessing, what makes you good at what you do today. So
Appreciate that.
maybe we start there.
I think it's really interesting just on the point that you made about how we were in this box of NYU standard paths, and then to see how people have spread their wings in different ways 15 years later, and to
Yeah.
see how our paths can intersect in these unexpected ways. I think it's a beautiful thing, honestly, and people are finding themselves, and it may be on different timelines, 5
Yeah.
years, 10 years, 15 years. But the fact that we're all reconnecting in these different ways and formats, I think is pretty
So
special.
special. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I never thought I would be diving into my hip hop past on, I guess you could say like an industry podcast, but
Yeah.
it was a really eye-opening experience being at undergrad, going to class, taking my finance 101 classes, and then moonlighting as a hip hop artist. And we have to paint the picture of this being the golden age of dorm room rap
Yes.
and the blog era.
By the way,
So
it was the best.
yeah,
Like,
I
it was the
know.
best.
There was something so democratized about it that anybody could pick up a microphone, and if they had a skill around writing and producing, there was this access to disseminate your music in a very egalitarian way. And that's what the blogs did. They essentially broke down the historical barriers around entry into music and allowed everybody or anybody who was interested to express themselves in this
Yeah.
very creative way. So it was really interesting to, one, flex that creative muscle. I mean, we were doing stuff like touring my summer sophomore year, for example, with Hoodie Allen, playing venues like Webster Hall, which we would walk by every day at NYU, and to see our name plastered
Yes.
on
Yeah.
that entry board or whatever you call it was pretty surreal. But I think that's what sparked my curiosity around the world of entertainment and how the different stakeholders make things happen. So the reason why I was familiar with the place that I work now, WME, is because Hoodie Allen, who we were supporting on tour, was represented by a big agent who used to work at this organization. So in a full circle moment, 5 or 6 years later, I guess, when I was in banking and I saw that there was a job opening at WME/IMG, I had this familiarity with, oh, like I know about this
Yeah.
ecosystem because of where I come from. And I think that allowed me to prepare and position myself for that job because I just had this vernacular and this passion
The
for the
authenticity
arts
around it.
and
Yeah.
creativity. And it was a really cool full circle moment of, tying all those different pieces
S-
together, albeit very differently than being on stage or
Yes.
writing music. It was the intersection of entertainment and business, essentially.
Yeah, and I wanna stick on that point for a second 'cause a lot of what I hope people get out of Magnetic is just a sense of inspiration, right? And I think before we even get to what you do today, which is in its own right inspiring, making those pivots are not easy for most people.
Mm,
Like, look at the industries you just talked about, right? You went from dorm room hip hop, to getting to your finance classes, to going to corporate life, and I'm really saying this through relationship to that too, because I did very similarly same thing. I was a dorm room DJ
mm,
that kind of made it his way to Tao Group and Marquee, and I was
yeah.
just seeing my name at Marquee on a flyer, and it was pretty surreal, right? Like, you got two brown guys like kind of making the wave in this, and it was just fun. It was culture. It was like
Mm,
the first time you nailed it with democratizing the ability to go do that,
yeah.
and that fulfilled me in such a unique way, which I know it did for you. But
Hmm.
we both ended up in a very corporate cloak
Yeah.
for 5 6 years in terms of
Hmm.
just maybe just doing what we felt it was the right thing to do. But I'd love your opinion, more importantly, on the inflection point in which you probably realized at the banking gig you were at that
Mm,
it wasn't for you and there was something else pulling
yeah.
you and drawing you to something bigger. Because believe it or not, I bet even at our age, there's people still looking at us saying, wow, like they're living a cool, passionate life. And I think it's so available for so many people, but they have to get to this point
Yeah.
that you got to early, thankfully.
Thankfully, yeah.
And so what did that feel like? What was that point?
Yeah, so it was a very distinct particular moment when I was banking at Barclays and I was in one of my MD's offices and he was recounting that he's been doing the same thing, banking essentially the same clients for about 2 decades since he was an analyst at Lehman Brothers. Lehman was a
Yeah.
predecessor to Barclays. And I think at that moment it crystallized for me what is that rule or indication about whether or not you should stay in a job. And it's if you look at your superior or somebody who's been in your group for 20 years, and if you get heart palpitations when you look at them and you put yourself in their shoes, then I think that's an
It's
indicator
incredible.
of
Yeah.
whether or not you should continue along that path. Obviously, isolating that different individuals have a different set of individual concerns and circumstances
Absolutely.
that may prevent them from having the flexibility or latitude to go follow their dreams or their pursuits. So I think it's important to be realistic. But in that moment, I said, maybe I should find something else. And there was always this voice in the back of my head that said, you deserve to be in closer proximity to culture, to creativity, to celebrity. And that's what led me
Mm.
down the path of actually, there were two paths. The first one was, do I find a job that allows me to leverage the skill set that I developed in the corporate finance world and find a corp dev like job, for example? Or do I go down another path of recreating my career essentially by doing something at the ground floor that's closer to the creative process, but would require me to essentially have a blank slate resume. And I chose the former.
So I think you also nailed it by this one phrase you use, which is you deserve to.
Mm,
And that's a special thing to say to yourself. I feel like that's probably where most people should start because I feel like in a lot of the conversations I've had, whether it's with younger, more junior folks looking to make a switch, I don't think they're telling themselves that they can or that they
mm,
deserve to, and that's a special way to think about it.
yeah.
So I can appreciate that.
What was your moment? Did you
Also, a
have
great
one?
question because yeah, again similar paths. I was doing the whole art. I always feel like I had two lives.
Mm,
Like I would like take off the suit and become like
yeah.
Superman at night, like go to the club and just take off the suit,
The
and
Superman,
yeah, and
Superman saga.
yeah, and it was awesome. I love the dynamicness and diversity of what I was doing. I
Mm,
was living two lives. It was hard work to balance those two things, and then it comes to a head, right? And when it came to a head, I had to make a very introspective decision around what was fueling me. And very similarly, I'm not even lying. It's not because you just said this, but I had a very similar conversation in my MD's office at BlackRock,
mm,
corner office. The dream coming out of business school or whatever, right? Is like you want that corner office,
mm,
but again, you said something important that he as well said was he was doing that for 2 decades, 20 years to get from my desk 10 feet down,
Yeah.
right? Just to get a view that you can get anywhere,
Mm.
right? And so it was it was this breakdown of what I had learned of the past 10, 20 years about looking at like the Mad Men era and everything we saw on TV and banking on Wall Street and all this like excitement and marketing that fueled us
Mhm.
that finally came to a head. It was like, this is not what it is,
Yeah.
right? This is really stagnant and not as diverse as I thought it would be from a emotional perspective.
Mhm.
And I think there was just this tipping point where I was in that office and I was like, this ain't it.
Yeah.
And I quit without having the next thing
Oh, wow.
planned. So that was probably not as I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend that. It
That's
was
another form of
yeah, I
heart
went home for a
palpitations.
bit, different heart
Mhm. Yeah.
palpitations. I went home to my parents for a bit, uh, which was nice to have that, you know, in reflection, it was nice to get that moment of just calm and peaceful, and it wasn't about the money for a second, and that's what led me to really realize I love this world of brand
Mm.
and consumer psychology.
Yeah.
I think the psychology part was what was so interesting to me because whether you're a DJ or a rapper or working at WME or doing what I do at Platform, like consumer psychology drives a lot of
Everything.
that.
Yeah.
Whether you're a consumer of the music, of the brand, of all of that. So that was my tipping point. Um, so grateful to have made that decision that early. A lot of gray hairs, a lot of stress come through trying to do a lot early on, but I
Mhm.
think going through what we did at NYU where you're thrown into the mix for
Yeah.
4 years, your emotional maturity typically being thrown into a city at 18 versus a college campus
Yeah.
is expedited,
I would agree.
right? And so I feel like I'm actually 4 to 8 years older emotionally.
Yeah, yeah.
I do. I actually feel 4 to 8 years, just I think I came up with that number, like, literally a week ago when I was talking to someone about
Yeah.
it.
Sounds
Like
very
that
scientific, though.
yes, it sounds like there's a method to my it's just the years of college where you're not even in class,
Mm.
right? Or, like, you're not working a full-time job, but you're in the city, so you're maturing in
Yeah.
ways that typical people don't get to mature because 'cause they're not living in a city without a job typically.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, anyways, tangent, but that was my tipping point, and then kinda led me to what I do today. But it sounds like after you had made that decision, you had discovered that, your passion lie on the creative side, the process, and that led you to WME. Was that the
Yeah.
next step?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I might be exaggerating, like, my proximity to the creative process. It wasn't like I
Yeah,
hopped on over to WME and started, re-recording mixtapes in my basement. But,
would have been fun.
it
Yeah.
was very energizing to be at an organization where you had a wide range of individuals that were focused on these different disciplines, whether it be content creators, athletes, production houses and companies, and you were around this energy of people who had this deep curiosity and were pursuing and executing on that curiosity in meaningful, tangible ways by the individuals or institutions that they represented being
Yeah.
agents at WME. And there was this opportunity to absorb and learn about all these different facets of the entertainment industry just by nature of showing up to work and sitting down next to somebody who was going down the
Thinking
sports
like
path
that. Yeah.
or going down the digital path, whatever it may be. So, my day job for the first 2 years, 2 to 3 years after I joined Endeavor slash WME, we've been through a lot of different nomenclatures or titling mechanisms over the last however many years, was around like pure play corp dev M&A on behalf of the different business units underneath the Endeavor
Mhm.
umbrella. So it's very much flexing the investment banking muscle, but in a corporate context, and the client being ourselves. And we had set it up similar to a banking coverage system. And I remember I raised my hand and I said, I need to cover WME, which is a talent agency, because I had this, I wouldn't say the word was obsession because that sounds borderline creepy, but it was like this deep curiosity around how do celebrities move culture and commerce. So it was just a natural fit for me to cover
Mm.
WME. And the context of that coverage was smaller tuck-in acquisitions, acqui-hires of big agents, any sort of capital outlay above a meaningful threshold. So it was very much taking the banking skill set, but applying it to a different context and a different industry. And then we came to this conclusion fairly naturally, but getting into a rhythm with a lot of the senior agents that were involved in some of this high level decision making around strategy and capital for WME was, hold on a second, we're getting an increased volume over at the agency side as it relates to clients doing non-traditional partnerships or launching their own brands. Why don't we combine this investing muscle, this corp dev M&A muscle that we had developed at the parent
Hmm.
company and apply it to agency work and covering our clients who wanted to be entrepreneurial. So essentially taking the best of what agents do, their relationships, their insights into their client orbits,
Yep.
and then marrying that together with, hey, like we can get into a data room, we can crunch numbers in Excel, we could service our clients in this capacity, I think, in a more holistic way by having these finance type folks working next to the agents.
Yeah. So you've which is interesting because you would typically think that core competency doesn't exist, but you put two together, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this core competency of understanding talent and a core competency of understanding everything else that pertains to a deal or deal
Yeah, yeah.
making or investments, which is that side of the house. You mentioned something interesting I want to jump to. So celebrities kind of moving culture and
Mhm.
commerce, connecting to culture and commerce, how they relate to culture and commerce. Such a big topic of discussion
Yeah.
in our industry and yours. We're all tangential and overlapping in many ways. We help amplify brands. You guys are really looking at the creation, incubation, and the the authentic connection
Mhm.
between a personality
Yeah.
and a celebrity or a creator. And I think we use so many words now, influencer, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
them, and then the actual brand. What is working and what is not?
Mhm. Yeah, where to begin? I think there is, admittedly speaking, an oversaturation of celebrities in the world of CPG. So there is this constant discussion on the internet, these LinkedIn influencers who are posting their do's and don'ts. And I think that a lot of it is this like superficial, generic commentary without having
Absolutely.
insight into the inner workings of enough of these brands to draw conclusions about what works and what doesn't. I would say that each one of these are different, but there are overarching generic through lines that you could piece together between the ones that have been successful and the ones that haven't. I would say, like, what we've been most focused on is just going back to this consumer psychology and understanding that these assets, these personalities are narrative building tools. And I think that the more saturated this celebrity CPG landscape gets, the higher the bar from the consumer is going to be around. And this
Absolutely.
word has been bastardized to a crisp, but authenticity. Because every time you're on a call, people say we need to be as authentic as we possibly can, but it's impossible that everything is authentic. Those two things are contradictory, right? But I think the importance of there being a pre-existing narrative about a certain personality's dietary regimen, their lifestyle, the type of things that really animate them in the public sphere, long before you ever launch a product or you launch a brand. And I think that duration and the quality of that pre-existing narrative is coming under more scrutiny. So in the example of somebody has been publicly discussing their journey with sobriety, if you then come out with a non-alcoholic beer 2 years later, that is a rational not escalation, but that is a rational through line that then yields a product.
Hmm.
And people or the constituency of said personality or creator feel like they're part of that journey with somebody that they admire, which then motivates them to support both financially and just by online chatter, right?
Yeah.
I think the exact opposite is, for example, if you were to see somebody who's been on the record for many years talking about sobriety, but they then launch an alcohol product,
Absolutely.
and then you try to weave a
Yeah.
narrative around,
A little more
well,
difficult.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm a great host, therefore I need to serve margaritas at the dinner table is a
Not for
little
me,
bit
for others.
it's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
So it sounds overly obvious, but there is a certain finesse that's required and consistency around how you tell that narrative before you launch something,
Yeah.
and the hurdles getting even higher.
Yeah, I nailed it. I think that's exactly how I would think about it, and I hope more people think about it because it is, to your point, natural and obvious, but many times missed and overlooked
Mhm.
because there's so much noise sometimes and data,
Yeah.
right? The data will tell you that your core customer is looking for a margarita, even though it has
Mhm.
nothing to do with your connection to that
Yeah.
product. I like this example of, and I'll use the brand name because they're friends and clients, but Bloom,
Mhm.
irregardless of anything else, just a specific example of her Amari as an influencer and what she's built, and that sort of you nailed it, the through line
Mhm.
of losing a ton of weight, being so authentic about that journey without asking for anything in return,
Yep.
and consistently showcasing, sharing. Use the word consistency, so important. Consistently sharing and showcasing her growth journey, and then creating a product that can help amplify that journey
Yeah.
has led her to build a community that will support her wherever she goes, and through that, it drives a ton of commerce,
Mm.
which many people forget, and you mentioned this earlier too, why it's so important is it's not just driving the product, it has to drive the commerce.
Yeah.
Because the through line, if it just hits the product and doesn't go through to the conversion,
Mm.
that's the big miss.
Yeah.
I love your thoughts on my opinion on I think it works really well for Mari and any other avatar like her
Mhm.
because she quite literally embodies the brand
Mhm.
all the time,
Yeah.
all the time, right? And that's a big difference than taking 5% of mind share or 5% of a person's ability to promote or embody because they're doing so many other things
Yeah.
and because they have very full lives and or maybe are parents and are working on 5 different other dream state projects.
Yeah.
It's clear that the more time you spend embodying something, the more it'll show up for your consumer, which
Totally.
will then drive conversion and community. How does it work for the ones that you've seen successful, or what is your opinion on that? Because there are some celebrities that I think can convert really well, but quite candidly, they only have 5-10% of their full amount of time
Yeah.
to embody something that's not these other 5 projects.
It is a delicate balance because a lot of what fuels a celebrity or a personality's it factor is the fact that they have these other projects that
Yes.
keep them
That's why it's like
relevant
it's like a interesting
in the
catch-22.
cultural zeitgeist. So if you're partnering with a musician, you want them to be on a 30 city tour. That sells out
Yes.
because that is a channel or a vehicle through which you can amplify their product and their brands. But also at the same time, your point is that if somebody is too busy to dedicate enough mind share to a venture, how does that manifest itself in one, their ability to be involved and move the needle in a multitude of different ways? And how does that appear to the average consumer
Yeah.
that's following the journey on the internet? So I think it's striking the right balance. And we've seen the individuals that are committed to venture and brands, they'll carve out time, and it may not necessarily be as involved when they're on that 30 city tour, but they'll make up for it in other ways. And I think this goes to another point that I was discussing recently is that it's not just about how you incentivize the celebrity co-founder or the celebrity partner. It's how do you incentivize the individuals around them that make their businesses go? The manager, the agent, people like me, a PR
Yeah.
person, because many times those intermediaries are going to be responsible for keeping the
I love
trains on
that.
the tracks
Yeah.
and ensuring that if said individual or personality is busy on a production shoot for 2 months off the coast of Greece or wherever, that you have resources to extrapolate the power of the celebrity without the celebrity not necessarily having to be as present as they were before the tour or before the production shoot.
Wow. I don't think many people think about it like that.
Yeah,
I
it's
think that's a
usually an
really
afterthought.
that is a very, very interesting point. I mean, yeah, you're right. There's only one person. They can't do everything, right? And to
Yeah,
your
yeah.
point, I love that other point you made too, which is you want them to do those things because if they're not doing those things, then they lose the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the zest,
You
right,
need
and the
them,
sizzle.
yes, you need them to be relevant for sure.
So yeah, wow. So incentivizing the team, making sure all the stakeholders that come together to help support this person are also motivated, passionate, and incentivized correctly,
Yeah,
and prioritizing that this is going to be a big project that we have to really put
yeah.
our energy behind.
Takes a village.
Takes a village. Given your lens and the broad lens that probably WME in general has around
Yeah.
celebrities and brands, what lights you up? When something
Mhm.
hits your desk, what are the things that are different that you're like, you were going home and telling your wife,
Yeah.
like, "I just saw this, it's sick."
Mm.
Like, what is energizing you? Because there's days that probably feel the same, right?
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
types of projects and ideas.
Not another healthy soda.
Yeah.
That's probably number
Yeah,
1. I think,
yeah,
things that are different, and I know this sounds cliche, but I'm gonna segue into things that are different enough where you could use the celebrity co-founder as a narrative vehicle to build awareness or build a new consumption habit that opens up new frontiers of consumer behavior or like certain categories. So I think, well, that sounded like a lot of empty speak, but it's
yeah.
essentially how do you use celebrity to bring awareness to new products and categories as opposed to like you're plugging somebody into, like I said, the 15th different healthy soda that's coming out in 2025, where you're essentially just trying to replicate the success of other brands that pave the way around creating a category, but how do you use celebrity to create categories or to create new behaviors? And that's when I think you could flex the storytelling muscle in a really interesting way. Um, I've been working recently on, for example, a casket brand. And you might say, what does a celebrity have to do with caskets? Um, it's a very outdated purchasing journey that
Absolutely.
historically has been dominated by these middle people, middle institutions, i.e., funeral homes, that make the process very cumbersome and opaque to somebody who's grieving for a lost family member. So, how do you sell cheaper caskets D2C? How do you build brand around caskets, which is like the most there's a lag there, right? Like you have to educate the consumer about there is a different way about grieving, about purchasing this item that starts 5 to 10 years before the event happens. So we've been
That is an very interesting,
very, very random, but we
uh,
are, but we're
but to
using,
change the psychology around that is a
yeah.
interesting project, so I get yeah.
Exactly, and it's not your usual just like there's a celebrity holding up a plush casket that you're dumping a lot of Facebook and Instagram
Yeah,
dollars
yeah,
behind, assuming that you're gonna convert immediately when somebody opens up their phone and
yeah.
sees, "Hey, there's a new casket brand on the block." But it is essentially like creating conversation, bringing awareness to the category, and having discussions in a way that has more levity, more humility around something that is not really talked about and is really in the shadows. So we have a creator, producer, director client who is behind the scenes doing these interesting content programs on
I'm so
topics that
curious
are
to see what
tangentially
those look
related to,
like.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for example, last year we did a campaign called Kill Daylight Savings Time or something because daylight savings time leads to an increased amount of deaths because of the change of clocks, people showing up to work tired and so forth. So it wasn't directly associated with the product, but it was a cheeky way to talk about
Yeah.
certain tangential things related to that. They also just came out with an interview show called Grave Conversations, where the host is interviewing his celebrity guests from the inside of a casket. And it's this very profound discussion around what motivates you, what are you scared about, how do you think about legacy and what you're leaving on this earth afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so not your usual pick up so and so beverage,
Yeah.
but something a bit
Definitely not.
different. Now, there are obviously less extreme examples of awareness building, of category creation that uses celebrity, for example, like sexual wellness, when that category was having a
Yep.
moment 4 to 5 years ago, and using celebrity as a conversation vehicle to normalize certain consumer behaviors and purchasing items in a way that maybe was historically taboo or looked upon with, a negative sentiment and stuff like that. So that to me is when I get fired up.
Yeah, it's changing consumer psychology, categories that aren't yet being
Yeah.
disrupted by
Yeah. That being
yeah,
said, like at the end of the day, you're not only going to work on that stuff. And to a certain extent, you could still create interesting narratives in saturated categories
absolutely.
if there's a good enough story, if the talent is big and compelling enough, if you have the right team around the table operationalizing these businesses, and if there are enough category tailwinds, obviously you're still going to take that bet. I was just telling you what excites me
Yeah.
that I talk about over the dinner table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that's exactly what I wanted. I would go home and tell my wife about a story like that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It's something share-worthy, right?
Totally.
Which is definitely energizing. Um, yeah, just Feastables comes to mind too. It's just I'm thinking about all the brands that we've kind of worked on
Yeah.
that have
Yeah, it's a great example.
like saturated market chocolate, right? Like redefining it, but
Yeah.
it had that the ingredients that you kind of just overviewed,
Totally.
right? The
Yeah.
compelling influencer creator with
Totally,
the
yeah.
operational team and
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't always need to reinvent the wheel or do something that's revolutionary. We've seen success, and like you're saying, taking something and tweaking it, whether that be the literal ingredient profile, the branding, the means of distribution, how you're thinking about those different components. It
Yeah.
doesn't always need to be as extreme as we're going to revolutionize the casket industry.
Yeah. And on that note, a topic that I'm curious to discuss with you that I feel like I don't get enough insight into or just don't understand enough is I always say that the reason that the conversion happens is because of all of these points of influence that happen around the brand that
Yes.
typically have nothing to do with what Target can do or Walmart or
Yeah.
whatever. It's stuff that's happening out in the communities, the ether, media and entertainment, etc.
Hmm.
Are there now unique ways for celebrities to drive that influence for their brands? What are the types of strategies that are being
Hmm.
run? Because the ones that I know are just a simple blocking and tackling. You mentioned a couple of them: Facebook ads,
Yeah. Yeah.
media buying, Instagram posts.
Hmm.
Are there other things that are popping up that you feel like will become more prominent, such as, or i.e., IRL pop-ups?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though that's been a thing for a while, I feel like they're coming back a little
Hmm.
bit.
Hmm.
But are there individual strategies like that that you feel like are driving impact and positive return
Yeah.
for these celebrity-backed brands?
Yeah. I always like how you talk about that holistic strategy
Yeah.
on your intro zooms. It's a good point because these strategies need to be multi-pronged, and I think historically there has been an over-reliance on we have a celebrity partner, and that's going to be
Let's
this
take it to the
highly
shelf.
yeah, that's going to
Yeah.
be this like highly efficient acquisition vehicle that is of course, the maybe fundamental piece of a larger strategy, but it needs to be multi-pronged and it needs to be more holistic than just, oh, we did a production day with our celebrity partner and they're going to post about the content and get a bunch of earned media. It has to be
I'm so happy you're saying
resourced
that.
in a more
So many people
meaningful
have come
way.
to us with, "Oh, that's what we're doing." I'm
Yeah.
like, "That's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough."
I think that it depends on the type of talent and the category that you're talking about, but usually direct conversion, not usually, but sometimes direct conversion from that Instagram story swipe up, it does not comport with the very lofty expectations of a founder or a brand partner because people aren't buying soda on the internet, or this is a more traditional talent that you could leverage in other more meaningful ways that are going to be more accretive than just how they talk about something on the internet. So I think it's playing to the strengths of
Mm,
the talent partner, and it's also being hyper cognizant about the product or the category and making sure that depending on that you're optimizing across channels or being realistic around the different channel strategies. So I think that brands now, I mean, the way certain brands have been able to like tap into the cultural conversation or just track the cultural zeitgeist in a way that keeps them highly relevant and in conversation, regardless of what the actual talent partner is doing or involving themselves in a campaign. Like to me, the quintessential or the pinnacle of that is Skims and Road, right? The way they're able to
mm,
leverage a cultural conversation and show up in culture in a way that is not that still, sometimes does rely on the talent partner, of course, but that essence, that ability to leverage those moments is separate from their celebrity co-founders, their celebrity partners.
mm.
Buyers and brands and the ecosystem is getting very hip to this, but I think that finding a talent partner who is very dangerous and like a consumer, not dangerous literally, but like very effective in a consumer facing way, but also knows how to move behind the scenes in certain rooms, whether that be with executives, buyers, you've
Mm.
seen this obviously in the context of your job, investors, and so forth. I think those dynamic talent partners that can move the needle in a public facing way, but
Mhm.
also know how to show up and drive value as stakeholders
Yeah.
behind the scene. And that can manifest itself in different ways. But we've seen, I think, some of our more compelling case studies of when a brand knows how to channel that energy to just one make certain stakeholders feel like, oh, this talent partner is really going to show up
Yeah,
outside the
yeah,
context of whatever they're posting on social
yeah,
media.
and that was my I was trying to make that point with the Marion Bloom situation, but to take that and kinda bring it to this point here is we've had celebrity-backed brands where that talent has
Hmm.
actually come in and led the discussions with Target, with Walmart, with
Mm.
these
Yeah.
relevant stakeholders that are going to be such a critical piece of their journey,
Yeah.
which again overlooked.
Yeah.
Right, those meetings are so important because, and I love the word energy around this because it is exactly that. It is the energy that that brand just showing them a presentation without that person being there
Totally.
in person, translating because buyers are people too, right? And they want to go
Buyers are
home.
people too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's gonna be the quote of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
buyers are people too.
Yeah.
But but really think about that because it people think of Walmart as this institution, this
Yeah.
it's fucking Walmart, it's big.
Yeah.
Like, they're just cogs in a system. No, they're individual, passionate people that also go home and wanna talk about something over the dinner table,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if they were sitting here, I'd ask them the same thing.
Yeah.
What lights you up to go home? And what's gonna light them up is, like, for example, we have a huge personal care brand launching later this year at one of the mass retailers. Huge, huge celebrity creator talent
Hmm.
driving it. It's gonna be a massive launch. That person has been so involved.
Yeah.
And again, overusing the word authenticity, but authentic in these meetings, using his slang, using his not changing himself in these meetings. Like
Mm.
the target bar is like, "Oh shit, you
Yeah.
just said
Yeah.
that?" Like, and but that's what drives the energy
Totally. Yeah.
through
Yeah.
the entire organization, which they're gonna take back to their desks. So,
And first of all, I'm going to be hassling you about who that talent
yes.
is, but I think similar to how the bar around consumer perception and authenticity is just getting higher. I mean, buyers are inundated with, ugh, like here's another celebrity brand, and the way to differentiate is to fly to Bentonville. I know you love spending time in Arkansas. I
Yes.
was there last year. It looks like, and it looks like I'm going to be going there again. But it's like now the bar is showing up to Minneapolis or showing up to Bentonville,
Yes. Yeah.
and this talent partner being able to articulate in a very real way that you can guarantee or you can bank on my involvement, and these are the different ways that the brand is going to utilize me that everybody collectively can underwrite for the purposes of marketing plans. And what the ultimate goal is driving velocity at shelf, which then, of course, leads to more shelf space, deeper commitment, etc.
Energy and connection, those things truly win tiebreakers.
Yeah.
Right? We've had 3 or 4 brands in similar categories, all celebrity backed, kind of approach the same buyer at the same mass retailer. We get the background information on
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
they're really feeling. The ones that are winning and get the attention and the red carpet are the ones that have done everything you just said.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
yeah, and that goes back to your earliest point of like making sure that they have the mind share and time to really go and please all and empower their operating teams and energize them.
Totally.
Okay, so you spoke a little bit about, your sort of day to day. I
Mm.
want to get back to another point, a more of a introspective personal note
Yeah.
on your end. How does your gig and the work you do relate to your personal life? How much of your personal life and inspirations you draw in your personal life come back to the desk on a daily
Mm.
basis? Because
Yeah.
again, a little bit of a tangent from where we're talking to, but an important topic to me is showing up inspired. And I think the people that are magnetic, that do draw other
Yeah.
people towards them are the ones that kind of can embody both the personal life and professional life into
Totally.
one. And how much does that
Hmm. Yeah.
relate to what you do, and how much is that is present in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that being a personal fan of some of these personalities or individuals that we work with is important because it allows you to be more productive and dynamic in the context of being out in the marketplace, talking to a founder about here's why you should partner with XYZ person, and being able to speak to that in a very personal, visceral way because it's coming from a place of I listen to their music, love their movies,
Yep.
watch their TV shows, whatever it might be. But also speaking candidly, I'm not going to be a personal fan of every single person that we think
Can't
is
be,
going to be
yeah.
relevant to the work that we do in talent ventures. But I think there is a very real subset of clients where you show up and it's like, I'm extra motivated to deliver for you because maybe you've had an impact on my life because I've been listening to your albums for 10 years or whatever that might be. That's the first thing. I mean, I think the second thing is sometimes people use my rap career as like a funny icebreaker when I'm in the room. It's
Yeah.
like, don't worry, he may be wearing a double sweater
Mhm.
and using this technical vernacular around investing, but you know, he has YouTube videos, I guess. So it's a nice icebreaker, but I think it's a meant to be a point of connection around genuine interest, which
Yeah.
goes a long way.
And you feel like that does help you bring things back to the quote unquote desk to add value to what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think that at the end of the day, if you're just generically interested in investing in CPG, you wouldn't be doing it in the context of a talent agency. There
Mm.
needs to be this deeper drive around, believing in this fundamental thesis that celebrity is a power for value creation, a power for good, and you view them productizing their interest as honestly a form of legacy for them. That I think is what motivates me too, outside of structuring a good deal and the potential of the client making a significant amount of money. But there are instances where these individuals, these clients come to us and say, I have such a deep passion for eyewear because I've been wearing
Mhm.
these different interesting looks for the 5 decades I've been a musician. And now this is my next frontier around how do I make my legacy more tangible in a different format
Yeah.
to my consumer? And I'm going to do that through having product that's accessible across D2C and retail. So I think that's really special too, is when there is this meaningful existential drive on top of the money.
The word celebrity, how has
Hmm.
that redefined itself in 2025? I mean,
Hmm.
WME, Endeavor, CA,
Yeah.
all the major talent agencies have seen so much change in the last
Hmm.
2, 3, 4, 5 decades.
Yeah.
Has that definition changed for you guys to include other facets of talent like creators,
Totally.
influencers? What does celebrity mean to you?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The definition has expanded. And I typically like to delineate between mainstream talent and more creator influencer talent. And I understand that to a certain extent, those two definitions are coalescing or converging depending on who the person is. But I do think there is a distinction between a classically trained actor who's been starring in movies for 2 decades versus somebody who came up through YouTube who's do it yourself creating content on a weekly basis across their channels for 3 years. Like to me, I think there's a fundamental difference between those two classifications of talent. And it's not just difference for an academic sake for me and Sagar to discuss on a podcast, but there are actual implications of how these talent engage with brands depending on who they are and their background. So that's a frequent question we do get from brands and operators of, do you think we're better suited for traditional talent,
Celebrity
or do you think we're better
versus
suited for your influencer content
yeah.
creator types? And I think it depends on the product, it depends on the story that you want to tell, and it depends on how you want to engage with a partner, right? Because that 23-year-old YouTuber is going to have a very different mode of engagement than a 45-year-old actor. And the ways that you could cross-pollinate between their day job or what's in their pipeline looks very different depending on that prototype,
Mm,
essentially. Going back to authenticity, the thing I find to be the most powerful with these content creators or influencers is the intimacy and stickiness that they have with their audience is bar
yes.
none because they've created themselves and their personas in the public eye in a very real-time way. So I think there's this very visceral feeling from their constituencies that we know you on a personal level because you've built
Mm,
yourself in front of us in plain sight, that I think leads to a unparalleled conversion when it comes to I'm going to launch a beverage or I'm going to launch a chocolate bar, right? Like there is this inherent affinity to wanting to show up and transact. I'm not saying that's exclusive to the influencer content, creator.
yeah,
We've seen a
yeah,
similar
in
dynamic
celebrities,
with
yeah.
musicians, with celebrities, but I think that it's more pronounced or it's more frequent with the former prototype of talent. And that's very powerful, but I also think it can be a double-edged sword and it can be dangerous in the sense of when you are building this audience in real time. And for example, like you're streaming from morning to night, there is such a scrutiny around if you make a misstep or do something that unsettles or upsets your audience, you're going to have that feedback loop in real time and you're going to hear it. And I think that can be dangerous. Like the stickiness and the direct connection can work in both ways, but if you channel it for the positive, it's obviously extremely powerful. I think that in certain cases too, when you talk about ability to scale and setting a business up for exit, yes, there's obviously a subsegment of the creator class, like a Mr. Beast, where
Yeah.
they have mainstream appeal and can take a business to 200 million of revenue, for example, or whatever the numbers were quoted
Yeah.
recently in these publications, where I think that sometimes more maybe like niche content creators hit a plateau around scale because the audience is smaller and very sticky, and you
Mm.
could sell through in a very effective way, but it can reach a plateau or it may not give you that same runway around a big retail program because you exist in one fragment or one pocket of the internet, not really like this mainstream awareness that will work at a Target or a Walmart when you need to appeal to a broader swath of the population to get to a place that is attractive for a strategic buyer.
So that's a really interesting topic of discussion too. How often do you guys talk about what does success look like
Hmm.
with any partnership? 'Cause and first of all, just this last few minutes of commentary, it's so interesting that you can break it down that I didn't even realize how nuanced it can get in this decision tree of
Mm-hmm.
how to partner
Yeah.
a brand to a
Mm-hmm.
said talent, celebrity, etc. Within all those confines, again, how often are you talking about if you're starting a brand, we need to start from understanding what success looks like.
Yeah. It's a very good
Like,
point.
I would guess that maybe some of the examples are, "Hey, Sagar, do you wanna start a brand? Great. Is the goal just to sell 1,000 units on a direct-to-consumer
Mm-hmm.
platform, and you're happy with that, and it's been profitable? Or is it, hey, we need to build the next
Yeah,
Feastables?"
yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question about how do you define success. And I hope that in time, there's going to be more of a shifting from we need to build something omni-channel and exit for $500 million for it to be a successful outcome to maybe there's an alternate format or model, depending on the type of creator and the product category that you're in, where maybe you build something primarily e-commerce to $25 million and it's profitable and you clip yourself a nice cash flow or distribution on a
Mhm.
regular basis. And that is a means through which you could create a successful outcome that
Yes.
doesn't fit into the paradigm of raise venture, lose a shit ton of money, raise venture, scale, scale, scale for
Until
the
you break
ultimate
even,
objective
yeah,
of
sell.
I need to sell for $500 million for this to be successful. Obviously, that's only going to work in certain categories with certain types of talent. But I hope that there is a little bit more of a paradigm shift that you could be entrepreneurial and successful in venture in different ways, or it could take different formats. I think that ultimately, whether it's launching something of your own or partnering with an existing brand in more of an equity forward way, is that we always try to couch the expectations or the parameters that are required for us to articulate to a client to do something is that based on the economics of an equity package in success, you would stand to make more from monetizing your equity than you otherwise would if you took a traditional endorsement with that same scope of service. So if you're like a $2 million a year name and it's a 3-year term, so your cash benchmark is $6 million, for example, we need to articulate that this equity package that you have with a Series B company based on a certain scenario of success of exiting to a buyer is going to pay you significantly more than the $6 million to account for the risk profile, the opportunity cost, and so forth. I'm more so talking about when you're partnering with an existing brand, there's an over fixation around percentage ownership because there's a very sentimental value. People want to say like, "Oh, I own 5% of a business," but like as we all know, 5% of a seed stage business is very different than 5% of a Series B brand that's flying off the shelf. So we try to untether or detach and contextualize more so in what's the dollar potential based on these scenarios and how does it compare to your cash
Mm.
benchmark based on, like I said, this over fixation around percentage.
Yeah, super interesting, and obviously, let's put it out there, a lot of these celebrities are doing this for the monetary gain. I mean, it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a for-profit business at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
most of these outside of just pure passion and
Yeah.
interest of whatever industry they're going into. We've talked a lot from the brand perspective into
Mhm.
talent ventures. The side that's probably more of a black box
Mhm.
for people listening is the celebrity side looking at the brands,
Mm.
meaning I'm a celebrity. What do I care about? Like, how are those conversations with you guys? Because
Mhm.
a lot of what we just talked about is the brand talking to WME or
Yeah.
Endeavor. Are the celebrities like, "Oh, fuck that. I don't want that. That doesn't seem like it resonate." What are those conversations
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
trying to give the perspective of celebrities looking at
Yeah.
whether or not they wanna get into a brand, whether or not it's a fit for them, because there's probably a lot of brand operators that may want to partner with
Yeah.
celebrities in the next stage of their growth. And we talked about one just this morning that's a, an amazing, superfood gummy, whatever they're looking for a celebrity partnership.
Mm.
And how can they prepare or storytell
Yeah.
better to folks like yourself or the celebrity to get that interest
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
that side of the table?
Our job is, I think, the easiest and the most fun when it's starting from a place of we hear from a primary source that so and so talent loves strawberry vanilla lollipop, or hey, I'm very passionate about the NA space. I'm looking to launch my own beer, because then you're able to take that nugget of information to the marketplace, whether it's a larger canvassing of here are your different operator options or going direct to the brand that they mentioned. There's nothing more powerful than saying like, hey, we literally heard on the phone that so and so talent is obsessed with your product. Let's start a conversation, because then
Mm,
you're able to circumvent the educational
I
phase
see.
when it
So
works in
reverse
the other
engineering
direction.
is not
I mean,
as
it works some,
productive.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I even use the term reverse engineering sometimes, but it does feel very
of
transactional. Like
course it
we're in the
is. By
lab,
define by
moving the
definition,
puzzle
it's
pieces around.
yeah.
But yes, there are situations in which you are speaking to a brand founder. It's an incredible story around growth, around product, around customer stickiness. And then you curate an idea on the client side of, hey, so and so person would be great for this
Mm,
opportunity. And then you go to the client and their teams and you have to educate around, hey, like you haven't heard of this you haven't heard of this product. This is why we like it. And this is why we think you would be a good fit for it. And then here is the economic potential of the opportunity.
yeah.
And depending on who the client is, you need to go to a different degree of depth to explain or justify those different things. And it needs to be very bespoke to how do you position the pitch that you're making to them to elicit the response that you're looking for, which is essentially, this sounds interesting, let's
Mm,
pursue it further. And just like me and you have a different way of communicating. Me and you have a different matrix of things that would animate us to a certain extent, depending on who the client is, their level of sophistication when it comes to venture and equity. You then tailor the pitch accordingly.
so many similarities between the way we operate as
Yeah.
well, because we're doing the same. Because we have 2 clients, the brand and
Yeah.
the retailers and the distribution points.
Totally.
And sometimes they're coming to us saying, "Hey, we love that. Go find it for us."
Yeah.
Which is your, first analogy,
Exactly.
and then the latter is more so we know this product's working. We have the thought leadership that it
Yep.
sounds like you guys are trying to also bring to the table for your talent partners saying, "Trust us. This is a great product, a great category, and, you're looking for an
Yeah.
additional,
Totally.
project to work on."
I think, candidly speaking, there's a lot of jokesters in our field who just run around and recommend really bad ideas.
To seem valuable? Why
Yeah,
yeah,
to seem valuable, to monetize the access that they
to be
have,
transactional. Yeah.
transactional, and maybe their business models are contingent on we just need to do the maximum amount of volume and just see what happens. So we don't really care for quality. And I think that's destructive to our space. There are a lot of bad deals, a lot of bad partnerships. And I think the most empowering thing we could possibly say in a conversation to a brand is like, that person's not right for you, or you don't need a celebrity right now. And that's totally fine. Don't force it. Focus on your fundamentals. Maybe in 6 to 12 months, when you have more retail distribution, more resourcing around marketing, a better sense of who you are. Because I think something that's extremely detrimental is when
Mm,
a brand uses celebrity to fill the void of who are you.
that's super
And look,
interesting.
I think to a certain extent, celebrity can be helpful in helping you define who that is and putting their fingerprints on a story, on a product, in a creative strategy. but it needs to start from a place of a brand knowing who they are and having a point of view. Otherwise, you just get lost in the sauce. And then you just cloak yourself in the power, in the story, in the identity of the celebrity partner. And that could be overwhelming or overpowering to a small brand.
I love that. I think that is such a sound piece of advice.
Thanks, Sagar.
It really is. No,
Yeah.
as you said that, it was highlighting. I was so many examples just came to flood in my mind of
Yeah.
similar experiences where, again, they want the same exact analog here is like they want the retailer to provide that void of just being more credible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, if we're in Target, we're more
Yeah.
credible.
But if you don't know who you are and you're going to Target,
You're lost in the sauce.
lost in the sauce.
Yeah,
Good luck.
yeah. No one's gonna stop for those 6 seconds to understand who you
Yeah.
are because you don't understand who you are.
Question for you.
Yeah,
How involved are you speaking about how identity can morph depending on the channel, right? If you're a D2C brand, the way you articulate who you are is obviously different than when you're on shelf at a Target or a Walmart. How involved are you in helping brands avoid the misstep of translating or evolving their identity articulation from D2C then onto shelf?
extremely involved, and for the same exact reasons you said, we actually, if I had to put a number on it, 6 times out of 10, we would tell a brand, "You're not ready.
Hmm.
Don't go," for the same exact reasons
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
mentioned. You don't know yourself yet. Like, you can't manipulate your copywriting the next day if something doesn't work out.
Mm,
Right, and you mentioned this even in some of the micro talent that can do that versus a big actor going on a movie that they can't change once it's out,
mm.
right? And so
That's a good analogy.
yeah, and so if you have this amazing D2C brand where so many people are invested in that growth that they've seen over the last 2 years, your customer is so dedicated to all the feedback you can loop into the product. As soon as you transfer over to a more stagnant shelf, you can't do any of that. So all these like D2C founders are highly, highly incentivized to look for feedback loops and to iterate very often and to be
Mm,
perfectionists because and I think that's where that all breaks apart when you translate that identity into retail because you can't do any of that. Once you put this bottle on a shelf, it's not changing until it's expired or until it doesn't sell or sells out.
mm.
And I think that's where you have to be very careful. Your exact point. Do you really know who you are? Is this a really good representation of everything that you
Yeah.
believe and embody? And once you put it on there, it should sell itself to overuse the word again. If it's authentic, it'll sell itself. We're very involved in that process. Again, typically we will be really honest and say, you're not ready. And to your exact other point, if you feel like you need to be in here right now, we're not the team to do it.
Mm,
My energy is fueled by the success of seeing something really fly off the shelf, not really we just did it and put it on and that we made a couple bucks here. And now look at what's happening. They're folding their business at this retailer a year later
yeah, yeah,
because it's not moving.
totally.
And so that's a really important piece to me, and I'm sure just as you are, we get emotionally invested
Mm,
in a lot of our clients.
yeah,
And that's a real important piece for all the things we covered today to really incentivize our whole team to really love the product, be passionate about it. And you can only do that once the product really knows who they are. So
yeah,
very, very similar in the way you
totally.
think,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
for our business.
I just really wanted to make sure that you had a clipping that you could use
Oh,
for,
I love that.
yeah.
No, but I think some of the stuff you're saying, man, is in confirming what I had thought
Mm,
that you guys really do, and then illuminating some points that I didn't understand yet, which was um, the nuances that really go into play when you guys pick up any talent name or brand, because then you can there's so many derivatives of the categorization of
mm,
that person based on their personality,
yep,
their passions, their time commitments, their
yeah,
financial situation, right? So you're becoming this
yeah,
entire advisory team around it.
yeah, yeah.
What's the vision for talent ventures at
Hmm.
Endeavor WME? Like
Yeah,
where does this go? Is this becoming a bigger part of the organization?
yeah,
A smaller part? What's
yeah.
where does this go?
I think it's going to continue to be a priority for the agency. I think, like I said before, the volume around existing clients or clients that we're going after that say we want to be serviced in this capacity of equity-based deals, whether that's a new venture or taking equity in a startup, is, in my view, going to continue to be very important for a lot of clients. I think that it requires a level of candor as it relates to this isn't meant for every type of client. You need to be at a certain level of stature. Like we said before, you need to have a certain skill set that allows you to add value. You need to have these storytelling chops, and you need to have the time and the bandwidth to show up and do these things. So we do represent, WME represents thousands and thousands of people. It's really incumbent on us and the agents to filter down to a smaller subsect or segment of who are the individuals that we think check those boxes
Mhm.
that can really move the needle for a brand. And similar to how we tell brands, celebrity may not be for you today, it may be relevant for you in 12 or 24 months. We're having a similar conversation on the client side around, look, you launching something of your own may not be relevant to today, but let's just get to know each other such that we're planting the seeds and building relationships such that in 5 years, when you have more time, or the stage of your career makes more sense, or your follower size is bigger, there's an existing connectivity that we could then,
Mm.
water. I think that the once again, a lot of people on LinkedIn comment on the state of celebrity brands who've never been involved in a celebrity brand, which I think is ironic, but they're commenting on it. And I think there's,
Keyboard warriors.
yeah,
Yeah.
keyboard warriors. I respect the hustle, but I
Yeah.
think that there is this overstating look, you want commentary that goes viral. And I think there's always an overstating of the demise of something. You see people commenting, are celebrity brands done, or have we reached a level of saturation? Yes, there is a level of saturation,
Yeah.
but it's not going anywhere. And especially, I think, as celebrities, they're going to continue to own their means of distribution, Instagram, TikTok, whatever platform comes next. And as we continue to have, I think, a fragmentation of culture, fragmentation of the internet, then existing in those pockets, I think, is only going to become more important.
Mm.
And maybe the format changes, maybe the categories of focus change, but celebrities launching brands or powering emerging existing brands is always going to be around. So I think our function is always going to have a right and reason to exist in the context of where we work.
Yeah. I love that, man. And I think if I can end on one note of just magnetism and part of the reason I was attracted to talking to you is because I know you fundamentally believe in the sensory experience of brands, right?
Mm.
Just even from your personal passions around rating hamburgers in New York City, to your
Nice one.
relevance in culture and community, and I know you and your wife travel a good amount and just try to engage with all of these worlds authentically.
Hmm.
Um, what are the few characteristics that really draw you to brands? And when I say brands, the lucky part for your seat is brands are both celebrities and physical goods. They're both brands,
Yeah.
right? And so, what are a few of the character traits that
Hmm.
really you feel gravitated towards as you think of the landscape and industry on a day to day basis?
It's a good question. I think the two things that come to mind are brands that make you feel something, perhaps in a functional sense of what actual benefit are you going to derive from using a product. But I think psychologically and emotionally, when you connect with a brand and it makes you feel something in
Mm,
terms of, I'm excited, I understand the purpose. They've created a brand universe that I exist in, that I subscribe to, that makes me even more compelled to be a consumer of said brand. Um, and being on that cultural train, I guess you could say, I think Vacation does an incredible job
yes.
of that, where I'm not just buying a sunscreen and the innovative formats, I am participating in a universe. I think that's incredibly
Mm,
powerful. And then, yeah, I mean, the obvious stuff of, how does this make my life better? And am I willing to pay a premium for it?
yeah.
It's obvious, but I think we lose sight
Yeah.
of that sometimes.
Dude, what a great conversation, man. I
That was
appreciate you. I
awesome.
really
Yeah,
appreciate you being here.
of course.
Thank you, bro.
Do we hug? What
Yeah,
happens?
let's
Okay.
hug. We'll hug. Dude, love this, man.
Man, thanks for having
Yeah.
me.